Mark Andreessen drops DeBanking bombshell on the Joe Rogan podcast. On Tuesday, famous tech and crypto investor Mark Andreessen appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience. During the 3-hour interview, Mark covered a range of topics, mostly centered on recent government corruption he has seen or experienced and why that pushed him to vote for President Trump, even though he was traditionally a Democrat. For those in the cannabis industry, one topic stood high above the rest: Operation Choke Point, a DOJ initiative started in 2013 that forces banks to remove accounts of individuals and businesses they didn't like, including political opponents. Operation Choke Point was expanded sometime after 2020 to also include crypto and banking startups and businesses. As one of the world's leading crypto investors, Mark focused on more recent instances in the tech and crypto world that he directly knows about. In these instances, he cited both founders and employees who have been cut completely out of the banking system and are forced to operate entirely with cash. As soon as the episode was released, cannabis entrepreneurs, among others, immediately erupted with stories of being debanked online. They posted mostly on X, where they feel certain they won't be censored for discussing and reporting government and banking corruption. A quick search for cannabis debank on X reveals an endless stream of posts echoing the woes of even getting a bank account to begin with, and often later on being shut down and banned from any and all banks and credit card companies. It should be noted, being targeted by Operation Choke Point specifically is different than the difficulty every cannabis company has to even get a bank account in the first place. Once Choke Point identifies a business or individual, they notify all FDIC-insured banks and remove the ability to get a bank account anywhere. They do this to businesses and individuals alike, sometimes both. Because Mark only talked about stories from the tech industry, I, at High 9 News, tracked down cannabis stories about being debanked, and several were immediately willing to share their experience. Angel Ortiz, co-founder of Mylars LLC in New Mexico, says, in October 2023, I had a pretty shocking experience with Chase Bank. Out of nowhere, my personal account was shut down without any warning or explanation. I immediately reached out to Chase, but even the branch managers couldn't tell me why it happened. It was frustrating, to say the least. While I never got an official reason from Chase, I can't help but wonder if my business had something to do with it. What made it worse was trying to open new accounts. I applied for credit cards and personal checking accounts at Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Ally Express Bank, only to be denied by all of them. I felt like I was being blacklisted. The whole experience was a wake-up call about how hard it can be to navigate the financial system as a cannabis entrepreneur, even when everything you're doing is completely above board. Kyle Sherman, the CEO of FlowHub, a cannabis-related software company, had this to say. I started this business 10 years ago, and since those early days, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, we've been kicked out of accounts with all of them. It's just painful, having to deal with trying to find institutions that will work for us. I mean, try to find a bank that understood that we are just a tech company. We integrate with state regulatory bodies like Metric and BioTrack. We're very friendly with all these organizations and these regulatory bodies. You'd think that we would qualify for a bank account, but we've been viewed as a cannabis company, not a tech company. And yes, I have been personally debanked. Chase personally debanked me many years ago and shut down my accounts. Again, without warning, it was just a letter, and then I had to figure out where to go. I think the problem with this is that it's completely uncertain. You can't plan, and that's both with personal and business. So that's where the stress comes from. You can't sleep easy. You could lose your cash. So I end up self-custodying crypto. That's also like holding cash. So not only am I an institution today, I'm also spread across various bank accounts. It's unbelievable. We're in a $35 billion industry that's legal in most states. It's ridiculous that a federally chartered bank or state chartered bank would shut you down for dealing in legal activity. If it was illegal, The federal government would be raiding our homes and they would be raiding our businesses, but they can't do that. And they know they can't do that, so they take this other enforcement angle, which is to put pressure on institutions to try to shut you down, which is illegal. Kim Rivers, the CEO of Trulieve, said, I had all of my personal accounts shut down by Wells Fargo after banking with them for over 20 years and cannot get accounts with any of the big banks. Very common with folks who work in the industry. And Ron Brandon, CEO of Kingston Royal in California, had a similar story. After detailing a long, arduous journey of losing account after account, he said this about being forced to hold cash. I felt safer, actually, with the cash in my possession than the money in the bank at one point. At least I knew it was bolted to the ground in the building where we had security, and I wasn't that far away if something went down. I felt more safe at night with that scenario than cash being in the bank. These stories are just the tip of the iceberg, just a tiny sample of the pattern existing in just one industry out of dozens affected. The federal government has also been applying a similar tactic by pressuring social media companies to censor these same companies and people also. In the Joe Rogan interview, Mr. Andresen contends that there are people in the incoming administration who are hungry to address this scandal of criminal activity perpetrated on American business and open up banking to emergent and fringe industries like cannabis, crypto, and so many others. Let's hope for the future of all of our livelihoods he is right. Mm-hmm. This is Jesse Barney reporting for High at 9 News.
Man, Jesse, this story definitely hits home. I'm really glad that you covered this because I know I got debanked and I didn't even understand what it was the first time when I went into a bank, and this was under Obama when I must have been debanked because he was the one that started this whole Operation Choke Point thing. I was raided once under Bush, twice under Obama, and never under Trump. And it amazes me that Bush didn't start this, that actually Obama is the one that started this, and mainly to go after cannabis companies. It also affects gun manufacturers, OnlyFans girls, and a few other different what they would call unsavory type of industries or whatnot. But you're right. Like all of a sudden I started having money that just was disappearing from my bank account, and I went into the bank to find out what was going on, and the bank couldn't tell me anything at all whatsoever, and I couldn't figure it out. And this has been going on since I want to say around maybe 2000. Man, so it was the beginning of Obama. I'm going to mess up the year of what year he was first initially elected, but I would say 2007, but I think it might have been a little bit later than that, in 8 or 9. But it's been a nightmare.
I think that's a little different. My issues with debanking, right? When they're talking about taking your fucking money, that means when, for example, my Square got shut down the first time. And they held all of my funds for 180 days. And they said they would give me whatever was left after making sure that they cover whatever charges the bank incurred in auditing my account, which was nothing. And I think that, you're doing your fucking job looking at risk. And that's the difficult part with things like check systems, right? Mm-hmm. So if one bank tells you to go kick rocks, there's now a system that is required by most banks. They're non-check systems banks, but there's also a company called Early Warnings that puts you on a list. And those lists are very difficult to get off of, unless it's an issue where, you overdrew your account and then you can pay your balances and be off. But when we fall into these categories where they're saying, no, you're a cannabis related business, because what I do is no different. There are people who will either pay me to do their licensing and compliance, or they pay an attorney to do it. Most of those attorneys are also banked. The difference is they're not going after these attorneys. I'm how many criminal defense attorneys do you have on Square using merchant services? Mm-hmm. How many people is Chase banking from an Esquire, right? If that's not illegal and you guys can bank them, then you can bank me. I write fucking license applications and do compliance. I'm not sitting here creating sales. I'm not doing this. I can account for every dollar that goes into this account. And it continuously happens. And I think that it's a bigger issue, right? Because there's also something that happens when you're looking at how much money is in the bank. There's a reason why, although they could, when you try to withdraw or move something over, they won't do it instantly or overnight, right? There's a reason why they hold funds, because at close of business, the more money that is reflected in that bank, the bank is in a better position. So when they hold the money for extreme periods of time while they're waiting to fuck you and shut your account down and ruin the rest of your life, they're also making fucking returns on your money, which you are due. And that statutory interest, should be also demanded at the time when you actually have your funds released. And if you're not doing that, I implore you to go back to the bank and ask for that shit.
Yarrow, are you still with us, Yarrow?
I am, and this is, first of all, I really loved this. Jesse, you made this piece. This was like a DIY.
Yeah, this is original piece, original
no
high at
AI
9
involved.
No, I said DIY, not AI. And
Yeah,
so
I said no AI involved.
okay,
Yes, it was entirely me.
yeah, so, thank you for leveling up. I mean, I love the way Rico usually just, instead of reading the article, talks about his commentary on the article, and it always makes me want to be a better High at 9 News correspondent or participant. And so really hats off for bringing the fire, making content, delivering that content. And for me, this topic is very, very painful. In 2009, on the advice of civil counsel, we took our articles of incorporation for our mutual benefit, not-for-profit Cannabis Collective. We went down to a bank. We opened up a bank account. We were super transparent. I shook the vice president's hand. We didn't hide behind gauzy terms like wellness center. And within 90 days, that bank called the cops, banged down all our doors, arrested 13 people, and I fought a criminal case for 5 years. And so this is a painful topic for me. As a result of that experience, when Prop 64 passed in California, I've been really focused on watching the glacial change as financial institutions have embraced this industry, or at least allowed for banking. But because of that involvement and the bank training that I do, through a company called West Coast AML Services out of Tiburon, California, where we help these cannabis banking programs with compliance issues. Because of that, I consider this like a solved situation, because I know of a bazillion banks. I mean, I hosted an NCIA panel on banking, where was the first panel where I said the names of the banks and the payment processors and the financial institutions and just let it all out there. Like, here's the cheat code. Let's figure this out. And so when people continue to talk about this problem, my mind is like, this has already been fixed and solved, because to get a cannabis bank account, in my mind, is not difficult anymore. And the biggest challenge is reducing the costs for these people who have cannabis bank accounts. And I think the easiest way that gets done is reducing the suspicious reporting requirements that increase the cost of compliance for the banks themselves. And so to hear that people are still continuing to have to wrestle with this is very challenging for me, because getting a cannabis bank account, in my mind, is no longer difficult. It's just not cheap. And so,
Yarrow, if you've been debanked, you still can't get a cannabis bank account.
That's not entirely true. So you can often find state chartered banks who will charge you sometimes upwards of $10,000 and $20,000 a month to process your transactions. And the reason they're charging you $10,000 to $20,000 a month is because they have gotten a notice from the FDIC about your EIN and your social security number, and anything associated with those numbers is under direct threat of possibly any moment the FDIC could bring the hammer down. And they're not going to bring the hammer down on you. They're going to bring the hammer down on the bank for banking someone who might be laundering money. That's what this is all about. Operation Choke Point specifically targets these industries, saying that they're likely to be laundering money. So what they're saying is the legal cannabis industry is likely to be laundering money, so you should put the hammer down and not let them bank. Now, these state chartered banks will do that, and almost every state has them, as Yarrow is pointing out. But that is just a feature of the problem of what Choke Point is doing to people. And that is a result of them targeting people. So now the banks are all on notice. Anyone with a cannabis company should be avoided, and there's just these few banks who make exceptions. And the reality is that them identifying you personally and then shutting you down from any bank and everywhere you go, it's got to be illegal. If that's not illegal, we live in the wrong country. I don't know everything's
it's
upside
not.
down.
It's not, but it should be. And I don't consider this, Yar, I hear you and I appreciate
think it's
the work
unconstitutional. What they're
as
doing
it
is
should be. As it should be. But I think that the issue is if I have to pay $1,500 to even apply to consider having a bank account, that's absolute horseshit. And that's too large of a barrier for entry. That's not a solved problem, right? And I understand that there's increased costs of compliance requirements and things like that, but then maybe consider your compliance contractor and why the hell are they so expensive? So, I mean, maybe there's some predatory billing going on there. I also think that it's just kind of frustrating that there are so few banks so that we're doing exactly what we complain about in this industry because we're putting ourselves in a position where your choices are, one of 5 or 10 or however many banks. Like, DAMA should not be automatically connected to fucking state entities. That tells me there's somebody shaking hands behind the scenes that's trying to say that DAMA's the guy to go to because you can directly deposit your fucking CDTFA taxes from your DAMA financial account. Stop trying to filter people to DAMA. Stop trying to make us have to go through all these hoops. The issue is we should all be able to bank. Unless you're an asshole and you're doing something truly shady, we should be able to be banked because now you're once again putting us back into a cash industry where if I do finally luck up and get somebody who's going to bank me, I have to pay a fee for that deposit. I have to pay a transport fee because I have to hire a transport truck to come and pick my cash up, take it to the treasury, get a treasury check, then take it to the bank. So now I'm also lagging on access to my money. So what if payroll comes out tomorrow? And there are so many issues. Like, how do you charge somebody to make a fucking deposit? Like,
exactly.
Every transaction has an egregious fee. Hold on. Every transaction has a fee. Like, this is not a sustainable model. So we need to get to somewhere where there is an actual solution because I don't think, and also you can't get an account if you're a fucking dispensary opening until your license is issued because then they have to go through another process that costs you between $1,200 and $2,500 for them to verify your license. So what until then? What do I do, Mr. Banker Man? Because every time I open a regular account, you're going to shut me the fuck down. But I'm sitting in that gray area right now where I'm definitely a cannabis company, definitely not operating, but I'm bringing in investor funds. I'm bringing in things that need to be banked. So where the fuck do I put them so that you don't hold my bank account up and shut down my life?
What are you going to say, Yarrow?
I mean, I just have never felt more aligned with Jenny than today. I feel like we're Siamese twins that are just not conjoined. Because
That's
she's
cute.
touching on all of the pain points that are very pronounced still, and the touching on the idea of how do you bank before your licenses have been finalized is an incredibly important point. The touching on the fact that even though we can get these bank accounts, that the fees are burdensome in a way that we don't see in other industries is really, really important. And to me, again, because of the bank training that I do and because I don't think it's difficult to get a bank account for cannabis entities anymore, again, because of just, living in my rose-colored glasses, I think that the metric for whether we have a healthy relationship with financial institutions as an industry is twofold. It's first, really what Jenny said, which is conventional fees, maybe slightly commensurate with the risk profile, but no longer as burdensome as the tax structures we're being asked to participate in, but also access to lending, because anybody will take our money. And look, if any of our viewers want a list of banks and financial institutions, I give that out all the time, the ones that I can disclose. I don't make any money from doing that. I just want the industry to be safer and smoother and more cost effective. But really the question is, when are we going to be able to access SBA, SBL, conventional business loans at non-Tony Soprano interest rates? Because anybody is happy to take our money these days, but who is going to be happy to lend us money at rates that are sustainable and traditional? And until that happens, I think the capital problem that's so pronounced in cannabis doesn't go away. And the fact that interest rates are higher today than they were 2 years ago doesn't make it easy for cannabis companies or cannabis adjacent non-plant touching companies to access capital at a reasonable cost. And until that happens, that plus taxes, that means that there's not a lot of fun.
Well, Yarrow, to your point, there may be something that is going to come up under this next administration that we won't necessarily even need small business loans, because if I remember in this interview, Jesse, Mark alluded to the fact that that this is something that Elon is definitely concerned with, and that he believes that it's unconstitutional for banks to just be able to debank people because they don't like that industry for that reason, and there may be some possible reparations or lawsuits that will be in place where people that have been debanked can seek some refuge from the federal government.
There's definitely that was Mr. Andreessen's whole point. Was that Mr. Andreessen's whole point was that not just Elon, there's a ton of people in this new administration who are outraged by this, because this isn't just cannabis. This is guns. This is legal escort businesses. This is ATM machine businesses. There's a ton of fringe industries that are getting hit by this, and people are being debanked, and they're being targeted and prosecuted with no due process. There is literally nowhere to appeal. There's no one to talk to. There's no origination of source.
It's very frustrating.
If you get debanked by your bank, they can't tell you why. They can't tell you who started it. You can't sue anyone.
They can't tell you how to fix it.
It's a complete removal of your rights as a human being to exist in this country, and it's frankly absolutely unconstitutional. And we live in a Stockholm syndrome sort of situation where we start to talk about all these other things. No, the story here is that the federal government is illegally, unconstitutionally targeting individuals and businesses and limiting them from their freedom on purpose. And it's not okay. And we all need to stand up and shout and say something together. This is not a left or right issue. This is a human issue and an American issue. And it's super deep. And I know there's tons of people that I talked to yesterday who they literally said, this is traumatic for me to talk about. This is hard for me to talk about because one of the guys was like, I got one of those treasury checks the weekend that I got debanked. He was like, on Monday morning, they cut me a $20 million treasury check because I had $20 million of investment in my company, and I'm an ancillary company. And they just cut me the treasury check. So I'm sitting there in my car with $20 million. That's not a comfortable feeling, and it's not a good feeling, especially when the investment came from legal and great companies. He was like, the investors were PayPal and Kraft Heinz and Headline News. Like we had legitimate companies investing in us, and our money got just given into our lap. And then he's like, then I drove around all week trying to find a bank that would take this check,
right?
And I couldn't do it. So what do? It's like you're stuck, and
well,
that's
You're beyond stuck. You can't even get answers. There's a reason why when you call in and you're like, excuse me, let me talk to somebody in this risk department who's analyzed my account. You're not going to fucking tell me in 2024, fuck it, in 2012, in 20 whatever, that you have a whole floor in your office that just doesn't have phones. There's a reason why we can't talk to these people, and because there's no good reason to shut these fucking accounts down.
Fair enough. You have anything else you want to say on this, Yarrow, before we move on to move it along?
Two things. I think it's a very slippery slope to retroactively sue over rights we currently don't have as a method to install or get some sort of justice over the rights we should have. I also think it's a very slippery slope for the government to be telling private companies who they should be doing business with. And I think there's a more elegant solution that has already been validated, which is state chartered banks. And so Fiona Ma did this ridiculous listening tour in California back in 2016.
I remember this.
To try to figure out how the cannabis banking problem could be solved, and it had already been solved in other states for other industries, which was state chartered banks. You put all the state money, the CalPERS, the retirement funds into a state chartered bank along with cannabis money. Other banks are going to have to do business with that state chartered bank. They're not going to say no. And so government has spent a lot of time doing this listening, doing these fact-finding tours, feeling our pain, town hall style meetings, and then did nothing with it and allowed private enterprise to be the imperfect solution with the pain points that have just been articulated by my fellow guests. And so I think instead of people suing and all that just is a suck of time and money and contentiousness, I don't see why the government doesn't come in and do a state chartered bank and say for higher risk industries that are still regulated, like all the fun stuff, the sin tax, the escorts, the guns, the weed, that they don't just create a state chartered bank that will bank. And that way, these entities don't have to worry about being shunned by private enterprise.
Well, Yarrow, I mean, your whole solution isn't going to happen in the amount of time that this new administration is going to take over and be able to fix this actually for us, and then we can actually get some real productivity done. But that was cute, very, very cute. And on that, we are going to roll into our final commercial, and we'll be right back. Thank you so much.